Welcome to the Explainer. Okay, I want you to do something really quick. Just take a look at the screen you're watching this on right now. Every single vibrant color, every bright glowing white pixel, it's all brought to you by a device that literally baffled the greatest scientific minds on Earth for decades. Today we're going to unpack the incredible, honestly almost impossible story of the blue LED. We'll see exactly how one underdog, working in this scavenged makeshift lab, totally defied the entire electronics industry to bring it to life.
So you might be wondering, why exactly did a simple blue light take 30 years to invent? I mean, throughout the 1960s, you had thousands of top-tier researchers at absolute giants. We're talking IBM, GE, Bell Labs, and they were throwing hundreds of millions of dollars at this exact problem. They all knew that whoever cracked the blue LED would instantly unlock a multi-billion-dollar industry. But despite their massive budgets and endless talent pools, they all failed. The whole dream of ever using LEDs for general everyday lighting just kind of faded away.
And the frustration in the industry was just massive, right? In 1962, we get the first visible LED, which was red. Then, in the 1970s, engineers finally figure out green. And then, nothing. Just a massive, frustrating, decades-long dead zone. For 30 years, the entire electronics world was completely stuck. We could only use LEDs for things like calculators, digital watches, or, those little red indicator lights on your stereo. Because without blue, we couldn't mix colors to make white. So we were quite literally left in the dark.
To understand why blue was so impossibly hard to nail down, we have to talk about something called the band gap. Think of the atoms in an LED kind of like a hockey stadium. You've got the valence band. These are like the filled seats down low, right by the ice. Then you have the conduction band. Those are the empty balcony seats way up high. The physical space between them is the band gap. When an electron falls from an empty seat in the balcony down to a hole in the lower seats, it releases energy as a tiny photon of light. And the exact size of that gap perfectly determines the color of that light.
So the whole trick is how we manipulate this gap. The recipe for LED light means we have to bring two specially treated materials together. First, we need an N-type semiconductor, which has extra negative electrons. Then a P-type, which has positive empty spaces that we just call holes. Put them together, and they form a depletion region. When you apply an electric current to this, electrons jump the gap into the holes, and bam, you get light. But here was the ultimate hurdle. Creating a blue photon requires a really massive amount of energy, which means you need a massive band gap. Finding a high-quality crystal that could handle a jump that big without just instantly turning all that energy into useless heat, it honestly seemed physically impossible.
Enter Shuji Nakamura. Now, he wasn't at some prestigious university or a massive tech conglomerate. No, he was a desperate researcher working at a small, struggling Japanese chemical company called Nietzsche. His lab was basically a bunch of scavenged, hand-welded machinery. Actually, he caused so many accidental phosphorus explosions that his co-workers actively stopped checking in on him. Out of sheer desperation, Nakamura goes to Nietzsche's founder, Nobuo Ogawa, and pitches this totally crazy idea: let us build the blue LED. Astonishingly, Ogawa takes the gamble. He hands Nakamura $3 million. To put that in perspective, that was about 15% of the company's entire annual profit. Just an absolute moonshot project.
But it definitely wasn't smooth sailing. Nakamura's first step was taking a year-long trip to Florida to learn this vital crystal-making technique called MOCVD. But he wasn't exactly welcomed with open arms. Because Nietzsche didn't allow him to publish papers, and he didn't actually have his PhD yet, the researchers over in Florida completely shunned him. They treated him like a lowly lab tech and wouldn't even let him use the working MOCVD reactor. But as Nakamura later said, "I feel resentful when people look down on me. I developed more fighting spirit." So instead of packing up and quitting, he spends 10 months of his trip just building a brand new reactor system completely from scratch.
When he finally gets back to Japan, he has to pick a material to test. The entire industry's favorite at the time was zinc selenide. It was considered safe, it had a tiny 0.3% lattice mismatch, and very few defects. But Nakamura? He decides to go with gallium nitride. This stuff had a massive 16% mismatch and literally 10 billion defects per square centimeter. I mean, the scientific community universally considered it a total dead end. So why on earth did he pick it? Well, he knew he was just one guy. If he wanted to succeed and earn his PhD, he had to work in a lane where the big budget competition wasn't so fierce.
So to actually make gallium nitride work, Nakamura had to clear 3 seemingly impossible scientific hurdles working totally alone.
First up, building a two-flow MOCVD reactor. Second, figuring out thermal annealing for P-type material. And third, inventing an indium gallium nitride active layer. Let's really quickly break down how he pulled this off.
Breakthrough number 1 was just a stroke of pure mechanical genius. Remember that reactor he taught himself to build in Florida? Well, he basically hacked his own custom version back in Japan. Usually, the reactant gases in these super hot ovens would just float up away from the surface and turn into this powdery waste. So Nakamura adds a second nozzle that blows a downward stream of inert gas, literally pinning the reactive gases directly to the substrate. He called it the two-flow reactor, and against all odds, it allowed him to grow this flawless, perfectly smooth crystal buffer layer. He completely beat the top university experts at their own game.
But right as he makes this huge breakthrough, disaster strikes. Nobuo Ogawa steps down, and Nichia gets a brand new CEO, Eiji Ogawa. And this new guy thought the whole blue LED research was a colossal waste of company money. He literally sends Nakamura a note saying, "Stop work on gallium nitride immediately." And what does Nakamura do? He takes the note, crumples it up, and throws it right in the trash. He kept getting memos and angry phone calls from management telling him to stop, but he deliberately ignored every single one of them. He just secretly continued his work anyway, fueled entirely by his own stubborn conviction.
Which brings us to breakthrough number 2, thermal annealing. He still needed to create that really elusive P-type gallium nitride. Now, his competitors were trying to blast the material with these slow, highly inefficient electron beams, and honestly, they didn't really understand why it was sort of working. But Nakamura figured out the root of the problem. Hydrogen atoms from the ammonia they used in the reactor were actually sneaking in and plugging up all those positive holes. His incredibly elegant solution? Just heat the thing up. By baking the crystal at 400 degrees Celsius, the trapped hydrogen just released, finally freeing up those positive holes in a super quick, highly scalable way.
Okay, for breakthrough 3, his final major technical hurdle, he had a pretty big problem. His LED technically worked, but it was incredibly dim, just not viable for a product. To fix this, he created an indium gallium nitride active layer. Now, experts at the time said mixing these specific materials was like mixing oil and water. It just doesn't work. But Nakamura used sheer brute force with his custom reactor to mash them together. He essentially built a microscopic well to narrow the band gap to exact true blue energy levels, and then built an aluminum gallium nitride hill around it to block the electrons from escaping before they could create light. It was a microscopic trap of just mind-boggling complexity.
And then, in 1992, after years of grueling, totally solitary labor, it finally happens. He powers up his device, and it emits this glorious, perfect, super bright blue light at exactly 450 nanometers. It was over 100 times brighter than anything else on the market, easily visible even in broad daylight. Nakamura famously wrote of that exact moment, "I felt like I had reached the top of Mount Fuji." After a 30-year global drought, a rogue researcher at an unknown chemical company had actually solved the impossible puzzle.
And this is where the story explodes. In 1996, Nichia took Nakamura's brilliant blue LED and made one beautifully simple addition, a yellow phosphor coating. Here's how it works. The blue LED provides a super high-energy core light. The yellow phosphor absorbs and spreads some of that light across a broader spectrum, and then our human eye perfectly perceives that combination as bright, pure white light. Just like that, instantly, the world finally had a viable, highly efficient replacement for the terrible, energy-wasting incandescent light bulb.
But we have to look at the aftermath of this invention, because it's a pretty stark reality check. For inventing the device that quite literally revolutionized modern technology, Nakamura received an initial patent bonus from his company of exactly $170. Yeah. Meanwhile, Nichia was instantly propelled into a massive global powerhouse generating billions annually. Eventually, when Nakamura left to teach in the US, Nichia actually sued him. He countersued, eventually winning an $8 million settlement. But sadly, it basically just covered his massive legal fees. All this while his inventions sparked an $80 billion global industry that currently powers virtually every single screen and modern bulb on Earth.
And you really can't overstate the global impact here. 1.4 billion. That is the estimated number of tons of CO2 emissions saved by the world transitioning to highly efficient LED lighting. You know, lighting accounts for about 5% of all carbon emissions globally. Switching from those inefficient, super hot tungsten filaments over to cool, precise LEDs, that is the equivalent of taking almost half the cars in the entire world off the road. It's a true environmental revolution, all thanks to that one blue light. Of course, Nakamura's legacy absolutely didn't stop at Nichia. In 2014, he was rightfully awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics. And today, with over 900 published papers to his name, which is pretty crazy remembering he started out not being allowed to publish a single one, he is pioneering the absolute bleeding edge of light technology. We're talking micro-LEDs that are just 5 microns thick for advanced augmented and virtual reality retina displays, and incredibly efficient UV LEDs capable of sterilizing deadly pathogens in hospitals in a matter of seconds.
But you know what is truly poetic about this whole incredible saga of complex physics, corporate defiance, and relentless grit? It's exactly where it all started. Years later, when asked why he pursued this specific color over anything else, Nakamura simply said, "I was born in a fishing village. In front of the house is awesome ocean. Blue always." That pure, incredibly simple drive to capture the color of his childhood ocean, it ended up completely changing the entire world.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I want you to do something for me. Look closely at your screen right now, whether it's a phone, a laptop monitor, or a TV. How much human defiance, how much sheer, stubborn fighting spirit did it actually take to illuminate those pixels? The next time you flip on a light switch or stare into a bright digital screen, I hope you remember the underdog who refused to take no for an answer and single-handedly brought the color blue into our digital age. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking questions and keep learning.